Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Billy Dees podcast. I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you have never checked out our program before, we are primarily a commentary and an interview podcast. You can find the Billy Dees podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. All the major podcast networks pretty much carry us, and we want to say hello to friends who are listening over at Goodpods. Awesome. So glad you checked in with the program. 2022. It's hard to believe, and I'll tell you why. I can remember being in grade school, okay? And they would talk about, by the year 2000 this and 2000 that. And we were like, yeah, the world is going to end by then. 2000 will never happen. And here we are, more than 2 decades in. It's hard to believe 2022. Science fiction has come around. That's all I can say. Anyway, I'm not really too much of a Scrooge. I joke about it, and I joked about it on one of our last podcast episodes. But the one thing that I really don't like about being off for extended periods of time is getting the machine rolling again. You have that momentum and everything's clicking along, and then you have to shut down. And it's not just a matter of, if you want to work, keep working, because there's only so much you can do. Everybody is hard to reach. They're off until the first of the year. And I'm all for, I want to be very clear here, everybody needs a break. Everybody needs time with their family. These are all important things. But the downside is getting that normal rhythm, that normal pattern, your routine, getting that back in place. So this episode is our foray into 2022. Now, typically at the beginning of a new year, we will reflect on some of the people that we lost the previous year. And there were 2 very notable people for me anyway, and I believe for a lot of people, that we lost right at the tail end of 2021. And that was Betty White and John Madden. Okay. Now, if you don't know who these people were, I won't spend a lot of time on it because there's a lot you could say about these 2 individuals. John Madden, especially in the sports world, which he transcended the sports world, but he was the Raiders coach for many years, and then he went on into broadcasting. And here again, his broadcasting for sports transcended sports. He was just a larger-than-life figure in the media. And younger generations might know the Madden video games, okay? Betty White pioneering the way for female entertainers way back in the day. I mean, we're going way back, in the day. Film, television, game shows. She was a figure throughout the decades in the world of entertainment. And you might say, well, what do these 2 people have in common, John Madden and Betty White? What they had in common is that these 2 individuals were genuinely likable people. In the retrospectives that I've been listening to about John Madden and Betty White, I don't believe there's one person that I've heard that has anything bad to say about them. And in this day and age, when it's so easy to offend people, do you realize what a monumental achievement that is? And there's only one way that you can achieve that. There's only one way. And that is, you have to genuinely be a good person. If you're not a good person in this day and age, the old saying, you can fool some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And for the decades upon decades that these two individuals were high-profile people, they managed to be universally loved. That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. And we're heading off in 2022. We lost these two incredible people after just fantastic careers. So what can we take from their lives and how they lived? And we really have to examine, what does it take to be a good person? And that's kind of what I've taken their loss in the beginning of the new year. And I've asked myself, it's one thing to point the finger of criticism at other people. And it's another thing to turn that finger and point it at yourself and do some self-examination. Am I a good person? So I felt it'd be a good idea to talk about some of the traits that we might consider that just good people have. Now, I'm not talking about being a saint or being, having lived some sort of a perfect life. I'm just talking about just your everyday experience. You run into somebody and say, man, that's one good person. I really like them. What is it about them? What is it about their composition that gives you that feeling? So I did a little bit of research here, and I made some of my own personal notes, and I came up with some talking points for today's podcast that they're little gauges. And there might be an it factor or an X factor, just like there is with a person who is in entertainment. They don't necessarily have any standout talent, but there's something about them when they're in front of a crowd. They have this it factor. And maybe there's the same thing with being a good person too. Maybe there's something that's intangible. They're just inherently a good person. I don't know, but there are some objective talking points that we can get into here. And one of those first little qualities that I would suggest is that good people are honest in their relationships. And I don't want that to get confused with just being loyal to people who may or may not deserve your loyalty. That's not what I'm talking about. But they're honest in that relationship. They're honest in terms of when the relationship is good. They nurture that relationship. They don't deceive the people in their relationships. They don't use people for their own personal benefit. They are honest in what they want from that relationship and where they stand in that relationship with the other person. They make sure that person knows where they stand in that relationship. And quite frankly, that can mean being honest when it's time to say that, hey, look, this isn't working out. And when it comes to people cheating, that's the one part of the whole. When people talk about the end of a relationship and they talk about so-and-so cheating, that's the issue that I have. I don't necessarily have, and I know a lot of people may find this a bit odd, but I don't necessarily have a problem with a person waking up one morning and deciding they don't love the other person anymore. I can't explain it, but that happens sometimes. Like that movie, the War of the Roses, there just comes a time when you've been with somebody for so long, I can't stand the way you breathe. That happens sometimes. But the issue that I have is when you've reached that point, it's time to say, hey, look, this just isn't working. Let's move on or do whatever it is that we have to do. What really compounds the end of that relationship and makes it so far worse is when the dishonesty begins. The side relationships begin. The lying and the sneaking around. That is what really turns the relationship sour. And I know a lot of people won't forgive somebody for falling out of love with them. I know that there's people who won't do that. But I feel that most of the time, there's a certain amount of respect once the hurt feelings subside. That, okay, this person was at least honest with me. They were honest with me in the beginning of our relationship, and they were honest when it came to an end. And I can respect that. And I believe being honest in your relationships, not just the loved ones, but your friendships, your business relationships, being honest with, when you're in business or you're working for a company and you want to engage in some sort of a partnership or you have some new idea about how something should go, you should be honest about why you feel it's a good idea and why it may be good for you personally if this direction in the company is going to be taken. Just be honest about how you present yourself in your relationships. That is so important to be a good person. Another trait of being a good person is giving a compliment. Now, that sounds like it would be very easy, and in some situations it is. When you go out to a party and you tell the host, wow, this is a fantastic party. Love your decorations, da-da-da-da-da. But it's different when, let's say, for example, you are both in the same business. You both have the same skill set. And you say to that person, wow, you did a fantastic job on that project. I'm not sure I could have done as well myself. Not too many people will do that. Not too many people will give a compliment if it in any way, shape, or form somehow implies that they are not good at the same thing. It takes a very good person to give a generous, heartfelt compliment. And I don't know what it is. I've been in the workplace a long time, and I would have to say that that's a pretty common issue. But especially I've noticed it seems like, and I know critics of the quote-unquote younger generation will say that, these are the people that got the participation trophies and everything else. And that may or may not be true. But it does seem like the younger folks give very tortured compliments. It's like they're sitting in a chair with their fingernails being pulled out. Okay, yeah, it's really good. It's so difficult for them to do that. And being a good person, by my estimation, is that you can give a compliment to somebody and not worry about how that reflects on you and your performance in whatever it is that's going on, whatever the area it is that is being complimented. Another trait of a good person is that they make friends easily. And here again, this comes back to an intangible. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's that X factor of being a good person, but there are some people who are so sincere and so genuine that they attract people. And when you start to notice that happening around someone, more often than not, you'll find out that charisma is related to being a good person. It's kind of getting back to what I said about you can't fool all of the people all of the time. When all of the people just gravitate to someone, it's usually a sign that there's some genuine goodness there. Not all of these people can be wrong. There's just something magical about a good person that draws out the best and the most positive feelings and attributes in other people around them. Another standout quality of a good person is that they are consistent. I mean, I can be a nice person for an hour or two, but a genuinely good person, there's a certain reliability in terms of, let's say, their temperament. Now, anybody can have a bad day once in a while, but overall, there's a consistency in how they treat people. There's a consistency in how they treat situations. They are solid. They are a person that you can come to with a problem, and you are going to get some sort of help. They're dependable. There's a consistency in who they are as a person. That is so important. Along these lines, a good person will generally try to find the best or the good in every situation. And that's not to say that they're overly positive. I do believe there is such a thing as toxic positivity in today's society, where you create a false reality and you just simply ignore the truths that you don't like. And I'm not talking about that at all. But, something happens, let's say at work, you lose the big account, and they examine the situation. They take apart the pieces that went wrong, and they improve upon them. They put something in place to make sure that those things don't happen again. And then they formulate an overall positive plan to go into the next project, having learned from that. And it's always a high energy type of process. Okay, we took a hit, but here's what we're doing. That type of thing. Very, very important, and the trait of a good person. Along these lines, a very important attribute of a good person is that they don't take things for granted. And I'm not just talking about being grateful for what you have, but that previous example where you lose an account at work and you work on those things and improve them, the reasons why you lost the account, and then you move forward. But the reverse of that is also true. Let's say, for example, you landed a large account. So what happens is we just take for granted that whatever worked well in the past is going to work well again in the future. And a good person recognizes that just because what we did with A, B, and C on the last account doesn't necessarily mean that those things are going to work again in a positive way for the next thing that comes our way. There's a balance in terms of how they process information, how they process information regarding things that happen in their lives and with the people around them. There's always a new set of circumstances for every situation. This next quality is kind of related to consistency. But a good person is generally always kind and polite to everyone. It's not a matter of liking everyone. We all know that that's impossible. There are some people on this earth who are genuinely unlikable. All right. But what it relates to is a good person will recognize that everybody has, as a human being, a certain intrinsic value that deserves respect. And there's no reason to be impolite to someone, to create all that negative energy. There's an interaction that happens with a good person when they are dealing with people that they may or may not like. That's always there. They don't mistreat people. They don't act like they're better than anyone else. They respect the good attributes that are present in that person in those moments that they are interacting with them. And that is very important to build on that. A good person will always take into consideration the needs of others. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they cater to other people to the expense of themselves. It's just that they have an awareness that their actions might impact other people. And they're aware of that. That is something that they are very sensitive to. They don't just charge into a situation, hey, this is good for me, damned with everybody else. That's not how good people behave. And this is one of the things that is so recognizable in their behavior and draws us to them. This next one is kind of one of my personal favorites, and that is they go the extra mile. There's a cliche, there's a saying that there are no traffic jams along the road of the extra mile, right? And that is so true. It's one thing to do a job for somebody or help them with a favor. It's another thing to stay with it until you know it is completed and that project is taken care of. And it can be as little of a thing as staying around to clean up afterwards, put all the tools away, give somebody a ride home, or stick around long enough for whatever it is that you are working on to be tested. These are the things that a good person will do. It's one thing to do something for somebody when you have to, or just give them good enough to get by and, okay, that's all you need for right now. Let me know how things turn out. Don't be that person. I try not to be that person. Okay? There's just something about helping someone and following it through to the very end to make sure that it is completed and completed well. That is something that a good person will do. I will leave you with just one more attribute of a really good person, and that is they are kind to their loved ones. And this seems like a given, but it's not. And I'm not just talking about their love interests, but their family, their close friends. Here's one cliche that drives me nuts. Okay. Yeah, I just absolutely hate hearing this. But we treat the ones we love sometimes the worst. That's a cliche that I just can't stand because I know it's true a lot of times. So often I've gone out with a friend, let's say this guy that I know, and he's a laugh a minute. He's always got some funny things to say. And you go to the local restaurant and you order some chicken wings and you're sitting at the table and he's got everybody laughing. He's just the life of the party. And then all of a sudden he'll get a call or somebody will come in and he says something crappy to his wife. Or he says something crappy to one of his kids. And it's like, what the hell, man? What the hell is this? How can there be this dynamic of this funny, good guy on the one hand, and then he turns around and the people who have invested, I'm not invested in this person, I'm not invested in this guy emotionally, but these people who are emotionally invested in this guy, they love him, they care about him, and he treats them like dirt. I mean, if that isn't an automatic disqualifier for being a good person, I don't know what is. But this happens fairly often. I notice it quite often, and it's a dynamic that I just simply cannot understand. I mean, treat the ones that you love and the ones that love you correctly. Don't sell them short. Be their champion. Be the person that they can always count on. That to me is a monumental trait of being a good person. Getting back to John Madden, Betty White, and their legacies. There's an axiom that I really like that basically says we don't always remember what great people have done, whether it be their achievements, their deeds, or what have you, but we remember great people. There's been a lot of really good NFL coaches over the years. There's been a lot of really good sportscasters over the years. There's been a lot of funny TV shows. There's been a lot of funny actresses and comedians on those shows. Okay. Will we remember them all? Probably not. But we'll remember John Madden. And we will remember Betty White because they were great people. And that showed in their work. That showed in how they treat people. So here we are in the wake of their recent deaths, moving into 2022. That would be kind of like my little message, I guess. Let's bring a certain humanity to our work. Let's bring a certain humanity to how we treat people. Let's make our deeds more than just deeds, but there's a little piece of us that are in those deeds. There's a little piece of our good humanity that is in those deeds and those achievements and the other things that we have to do to get through life. There's a little bit of us, a little bit of our humanity, a little bit of goodness in those things. All right, I am Billy Dees. What makes a good person to you? What qualities do you look for? Tell you what, you can find me on Twitter. That's kind of like my social media home, at Billy Dees. Feel free to tweet me anytime you like. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast today. Moving forward into 2022, it's going to be a good year for all of us. I can feel it. It's going to be a good time. And we're going to have some great podcasts for you. Have a great week. Well, hello, everyone. I am Billy Dees from the self-titled Billy Dees podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more of the best podcast networks. Join me for my commentary and interviews. Follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy Dees. I am Billy Dees. I'd love to have you listen in.